Okay.
Well, Judy, on my screen it said the show is now being live streamed. So.
Yes. Okay. So there we go. Let me find you again. Great. So we are being live streamed or being recorded. So some weirdness happening with my camera. But anyway, good evening. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us again. Very quickly, I'm Judy Kitt, the president of the Foundation for Mind Being Research, which is an all-volunteer run 501c3 nonprofit in the San Francisco Bay Area. We've been exploring the bridges between science and consciousness since 1980 for 43 years now. If you want to check us out, we're at fmbr.org, and we have a YouTube channel where some people are watching now. And if you go to YouTube, that is FMBR TV, and you can subscribe by clicking on the little bell, and that will let you know when we're live. So this evening, we are very honored to have Robert Waggoner join us via Zoom. He was with us years ago. We can't remember how long ago it was, but he was with us in person, and we just so enjoyed hearing him speak, just with beautiful topic here. Robert wrote the acclaimed book Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self, which is now in its 10th printing, and he co-authored Lucid Dreaming: Plain and Simple with Caroline McCready. His books have been translated into French, German, Chinese, Korean, Czech, Finnish, and other languages. So that really speaks to how, to the interest, to the worldwide interest there is in this topic. He's the past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, and he serves as co-editor of the online magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience, which is the only ongoing publication devoted specifically to lucid dreaming. A lucid dreamer since 1975, he has logged more than 1,000 lucid dreams, and probably more by now, huh? He speaks frequently on the science and practice of lucid dreaming at international dream conferences and workshops in college classrooms and in the media appearances. He's been on CNN, CBS, and ABC News. So, Robert, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to welcome you.
Thanks, Judy. It's great to be here, and I really enjoyed being there in person with FMBR. It was just a great event, and I look forward to coming back someday.
Yeah, I hope so.
Good. Well, I think I'll just go ahead and launch into it. And
Sure.
What I plan to do, if that's all right, is go on for 40 or 45 minutes and then open it up for questions for 40 minutes.
Perfect.
Does that sound good? Okay. Okay, well, good. I'm going to share my screen here. And here we go. So great. So what we want to talk about tonight is lucid dreaming and healing, how lucid dreaming allows for healing and wholeness. These are the two books that I've written: Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self, and also Lucid Dreaming: Plain and Simple. And if you want to know what the difference is, Lucid Dreaming: Plain and Simple is all about the techniques, about how to induce lucid dreaming, how to stabilize the lucid dream, how to interact with dream figures, interact with the dream environment, how to explore and experiment. And so that's the difference between the two books. The Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self is just a very deep exploration into all the fantastic things that you can do in lucid dreaming. And also, as Judy mentioned, I also co-edit the Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine at luciddreamingmagazine.com. But I assume most everyone watching knows what a lucid dream is, but just in case, the American Psychological Association dictionary says a lucid dream is a dream in which the sleeper is aware that he or she is dreaming and may be able to influence the progress of the dream narrative. For most of us, we would just put it very simply that a lucid dream is when you realize you're dreaming while you're in the dream state. You know, hey, this is a dream. And so to kind of give you an illustration, this was my first spontaneous lucid dream around age 10 or 11. So I found myself at the public library in my hometown. I was looking through the book stacks, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw something moving, and I looked over and noticed that it was a tiny Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur walking through the book stack. And so even though I was 10 or 11, I thought, wait a second, dinosaurs are extinct. How can this be? And at that moment, I realized that the only explanation that made sense is that I was dreaming. And then I thought, well, if this is a dream, then I can wake up and prove it. And so I told myself to wake up. I woke up and I proved that, oh, I had been aware there for 20 seconds within a lucid dream. But at that time, of course, no one talked about lucid dreaming. The scientific evidence hadn't emerged. It was in 1975, that's when I first started to consciously induce lucid dreams. But again, the scientific evidence wasn't out there yet. I was a young guy in high school reading a book called Journey to Ixtlan by Carlos Castaneda. And as some of you know, Carlos Castaneda was a UCLA graduate student in anthropology who decided to study psychoactive plants. And so he found a native shaman one time in a visit to Arizona, Don Juan, who told him that he would teach him about psychoactive plants. But in this book, it's like he's teaching them about everything else except for psychoactive plants. And one of the lessons was Don Juan wanted him to find his hands in the dream state and become aware of dreaming. And so even though I'm a junior in high school, I'm reading that thinking, wait a second, how can that be? How can you become aware within a dream that you're dreaming? And so there wasn't a technique. And so I just created a technique. Every night before I'd go to sleep, I'd look at my hands while telling myself, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And I would just look at my hands and say that over and over and over for about 5 minutes and fall asleep. On the third night, I'm walking through my high school hallway and boom, my hands pop right in front of my face. And I say, oh my God, this is a dream. And it was so incredible to realize that those football player guys, they're just dream figures. And I reached over and touched the concrete wall, and it was cool and nubby, just like a concrete wall should be. And then I went on to just have an incredible lucid dream. It just truly blew my mind. But that's how I got started on this path of lucid dreaming. Now, the interesting thing is the history of lucid dreaming goes on for many thousands of years. In fact, there's one Tibetan Buddhist, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who says that in the Bon native group in Tibet, that they had been practicing lucid dreaming for 8,000 years. And so I just put some of the images here to kind of give you an idea. In ancient Egypt, there were societies of the night. And some of the activity that I've seen when I visited Egypt suggests to me that they indeed were lucid dreamers. Also, in the Central and South American native cultures, they're obviously very deep into lucid dreaming. Of course, Carlos Castaneda tried to make that point. There's another gentleman now, Sergio Mañana, who says he's the official explainer of the Mixteca Toltec tradition of lucid dreaming. And so there's all of that. In a lot of Native American societies, they have secret societies that do lucid dreaming. And so you don't hear about them because you're probably not a member of those secret societies. But lucid dreaming has just been going on for many thousands of years. Now, of course, in Buddhism, there's Buddhist dream yoga that's been in effect for about 2,000 years now. And normally in that tradition, you go to a Buddhist dream yoga monastery for 3 years to learn how to use lucid dreaming and pair it with, connect it to a Buddhist philosophy. and explore and experiment until you come to a true understanding of the nature of things. One time in a lucid dream, I ran into these guys wearing black silk robes. And when I woke up, I thought, well, wait a second, who wears black silk robes? These Asian gentlemen. So I asked some friends of mine who are Chinese esoteric Buddhists, and they told me, oh, those are Taoist monks. And I go, Taoists practice lucid dreaming and things? And they go, oh, yeah, it's a secret society. Nobody talks about it. But of course, they're heavily involved in this. Also here at the bottom, I put an image of the temple of Epidaurus in Greece. This was an Asclepian temple dedicated to Asclepius, the semi-divine god of healing. And across the Mediterranean area was almost 200 temples, more than 200 temples dedicated to Asclepius. And what would happen there is people would go there if their local doctor hadn't been able to help them. And there they would try to have a dream in which Asclepius, or one of his 8 daughters, Panagia, Hygienia, would appear and tell them either what they should do in order to become well, or sometimes actually heal them on the spot. And carved into the side of these temples are the stories of people who met Asclepius in the dream state and were healed. And so it's really fascinating to see how long lucid dreaming and dreaming have been connected to healing. Oops, sorry. There's another wonderful story in the letters of St. Augustine. I think it's letter 127 or letter 147. But anyway, this is back in 415 AD. And so St. Augustine hears the story of Gennadius, who was a physician in Carthage. And as a physician and a new Christian, he wondered, how could people be resurrected? Because he would go out to the grave sites or go out to the desert and just see bones of humans just burning away in the desert sun. And so he thought, how could they be resurrected? What would that be? And so he was thinking about that a lot. And one night he sees a radiant youth in his dream. And then the next night he sees the same radiant youth. And all of a sudden, the radiant youth begins to talk to him and ask, where have we met? And Gennadius says, in last night's dream. And the youth asks, where is your body right now? And Gennadius realizes that he's sleeping in bed. And then the youth reminds him, what then are the eyes with which you see me? And Gennadius couldn't respond. He couldn't figure it out. The youth told him that after death, there will be a faculty of perception by which you shall still perceive. And so St. Augustine used this account of this lucid dream to basically get across the idea that in the after-death state, everyone would have their faculties and be able to engage in interactions. Now that's kind of the ancient history of lucid dreaming, but more recently, besides Carlos Castaneda, there was also another gentleman, Paul Foley, who was a German psychotherapist. He taught himself a technique to become lucidly aware back in 1959 after being a college student in philosophy. He came up with a way of tricking himself into becoming consciously aware. But I'm going to move really fast forward here just to say that the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming occurs in the 70s. Really, it started with Keith Hearne in England at the University of Hull. He met a young man, Alan Worsley, who said he could become lucidly aware in the dream state. And so Keith Hearne was a graduate student and thought, well, how could you really prove that? I mean, I don't disbelieve this man, but how could someone prove that? And then it occurred to him that, oh, in the dream state, we normally have eye movement, rapid eye movement. What if I brought him into the sleep lab and told him to move his eyes left to right 8 times when he became lucidly aware? And I would record all of this in the sleep lab and provide the evidence. And so It was in April of 1975, just around the same exact time when I had my first consciously induced lucid dream, that Alan Worsley came into the sleep lab. He realized within a dream he was dreaming. He moved his eyes left to right 8 times. And when Keith Hearne, the scientist, saw that mark of the eye movements moving in tandem together, he was just blown away. He said, philosophically and metaphysically, it was like getting signals from another universe. It was truly a mind blower. So here's an example from Stephen LaBerge, who most of us are more familiar with, because 2 years later, he did basically the same thing, using himself as the lucid dreamer. He brought himself into the sleep lab. He put rapid eye movement polygraph pads on his eyes. Here in this example, we have LOC and ROC, so left ocular and right ocular. And you can see here in this first group of squiggles that the person's eyes are moving. They're moving every which way. Sometimes they move together, sometimes they move apart. They're just going all over the place. But then suddenly here in the middle of the second table, the eyes begin to move in tandem, and the person signaling, hey, I'm consciously aware within the dream. And then here later, probably 20 seconds later, the person is signaling again. And in this particular experiment, I think it was that he was signaling, oh, I'm beginning the experiment. And then here at the 4th level, he's signaling again, I'm ending the experiment. And then later he signals he's going to wake up, and he wakes up. And these other measures, the EMG and the C3, are just showing that the person is in the sleep state, that they haven't had a brief awakening and they're moving their eyes. No, their body is in sleeping. And so this was called the eye signal verification technique, and proved that lucid dreaming indeed occurred. And it was replicated many times over this same study. Now, it oftentimes helps to get a sense of how do lucid dreams differ from a normal dream. And so think about a normal dream. You're there in the Bay Area, all of a sudden you look up and Godzilla is coming out of the water. And what do? You know, normally you run, you go get your parents, you tell them we got to get out of here, Godzilla's come, and you make up a story to explain it all. So in a normal dream, you normally just react to whatever events occur. You create a story in your head to justify what's occurring. And it's very obvious that you lack any high level of critical awareness. You just go along with whatever is happening and just accept it as reality. But in a lucid dream, all of a sudden, at that moment, that's when you start to think, wait a second, Godzilla is a fictional character. He's a creation of Hollywood. And so at that moment, you become lucidly aware. So now your level of critical awareness has increased. You have some idea of critical awareness. You can begin to decide, what do I want to do here? You can select a response. So for example, you could go up to Godzilla and say, hey, Godzilla, what do you represent? And oftentimes that Godzilla will tell you exactly what he represents. You can seek out insights, you can do experiments, you can ask Godzilla, why are you chasing me? Or you could just ignore Godzilla and fly away. It's all up to you what you want to do. But that's how lucid dreaming differs from a regular dream. You can begin to decide what it is you want to do and proceed. So just to kind of see this in a neurophysiological way, here was a lovely study by Ursula Voss in Germany, and J. Allen Hobson and Harvard and others. And they put a 19-channel EEG skull cap around the lucid dreamer in the sleep lab because they wanted to measure their brain activity when they're lucidly aware. So in this diagram, at the very top here, we see the lucid dreamer while they're awake. Like this would be like me awake right now. The cerebral cortex, the top portion of my brain, is very active. You can see by the red and yellow. Then down here at the bottom is the same person, but they're having a regular dream. So in a regular dream, their cerebral cortex, the upper layer of their brain, isn't very active. But suddenly here in the middle, when they signal, hey, I'm lucidly aware, suddenly their cerebral cortex becomes more active, certain areas become more active. And so they called lucid dreaming a hybrid state of consciousness, since it showed that the normal dreaming portions of the brain and the more conscious portions of the brain, the cerebral cortex, were active at the same time. And so that's kind of a wonderful illustration of that. Also, there's another study done by Martin Dressler in the Netherlands and a number of his colleagues, where they had the lucid dreamer in an fMRI and had them all padded up so that they couldn't hear the sound or the vibration and couldn't hear it. The person signaled that they were lucidly aware, and then the fMRI was able to get a picture of what the brain activity looked like. I'm not going to read all of this, but what happened was that the area of the brain that's commonly connected to the function of self-assessment, and the portions of the brain that are commonly connected to evaluating our own thoughts and feelings, and the portions connected with self-perception, all of those places became activated. So it basically showed that, oh, I'm aware that I'm within a dream. Oh, now I can evaluate my own thoughts and feelings. I can decide what I want to do. Oh, now I can perceive a self within this lucid dream. I can see my hand and pull my finger and make it longer. I can do all sorts of fun things. And so that's just another wonderful showing of what happens when you become lucidly aware. Now, some people always ask me, well, how many people have lucid dreams? And so when you ask a college classroom, you'll find that about 70% of the kids in the psychology class can report at least one lucid dream. And you can see the other nations, it's much the same, that they normally can come up with at least one lucid dream. However, about 25% say that they're frequent lucid dreamers, that they have lucid dreams happen at least once a month. There was another study where Ursula Voss in Germany wanted to know, well, when do people start lucid dreaming? And so she went to a school where there were 694 German school children ages 6 to 19. And she began to ask them, have you ever become aware within a dream that you're dreaming? And she had her researchers get the actual stories just to make sure that the person was lucidly aware. And what's really interesting about this study, if I read it correctly, about 20% of the 8-year-olds had already had a lucid dream. And I just found that incredible. And so it was obvious no one had taught them, no one had trained them on how to behave in a lucid dream. They were just spontaneously having lucid dreams. And so of this cohort, 51% reported a lucid dream. Like here's one that I really like. The girl is 10 years old. She said, someone was haunting me and I was with my girlfriend. The chaser stood before me and wanted to kill me. And then I realized it was only a dream. So I made the person disappear, and then suddenly it wasn't dark anymore. And what I love about this is just the symbolism that something negative, something bad's happening, and it's dark and all. But as soon as she becomes lucid and makes the chaser disappear, then suddenly, without her doing anything, it's no longer dark. It's like the lucid dream environment showed her that, oh, you've succeeded, and now the lights will come on. So lucid dreaming, and this is why I've written books on lucid dreaming, it just is an open platform for exploration and experimentation. And so besides just figuring out how dreams work and how the dream state works, you can also use it to enhance your skills. There's been studies that show about 8 or 9% of the professional athletes in Germany use lucid dreaming to enhance their skill levels. So they'll practice their sport in a lucid dream in order to become better. And that was part of the work of Paul Foley, that psychotherapist I talked about earlier. You can use lucid dreaming to access creativity. Oftentimes in my lucid dreams, I'll just be stunned by the creativity that you can access. So people have used it to discover the most incredible art they can create, discover the most incredible music that they could ever play. People use it for all sorts of things. It's truly fantastic. You can use it to resolve emotional issues. We'll get into that later. For physical healing, you can access an inner awareness. And that's why I call my first book Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self, because I realized that in a lucid dream, you could ignore the dream figures and just shout out a question to your unconscious mind and either hear a response or see that response symbolically portrayed in the lucid dream. It's truly phenomenal. You can use it for spiritual growth. You can meditate in a lucid dream. You can ask to experience a quality of the divine. You can totally have your mind blown. So again, lucid dreaming is an open platform. But in today's class, I really wanted to focus on the healing aspects of lucid dreaming. And besides psychological healing or emotional healing, there's the idea of physical healing. But then finally, there's also the idea of healing grief, because there's a lot of people out there who have lost a loved one and they can't come to terms with their grief. They can't get their grief to stop, to not be overwhelming. And I'm beginning to wonder if lucid dreaming might be a way to deal with that. And so I'm going to get into that here in a bit. So probably the first reports of lucid dreaming and therapy occurred in 1982. There was this therapist in Ohio, Gordon Halliday, and he had two clients who had post-traumatic stress disorder and were having recurring nightmares every night. And so he brought them into his clinic and he taught them how to become lucidly aware. And he told them, when you become lucidly aware in that recurring nightmare, just change one thing. That's all I want you to do. Just change one thing. And so both of the patients became aware within the recurring nightmare. They became lucidly aware and they realized, oh, this is a dream. And then they both changed one thing. And what happened was that their nightmares basically ceased. And so this is the first evidence of using lucid dreaming to end recurring nightmares and PTSD. Here's another example from the Israeli Journal of Psychiatry. Henry Abramovich had a client come to visit who hadn't been able to sleep for 3 days because she had this nightmare of being chased by a train. And so as they talked, he realized that she had occasional lucid dreams. And so he encouraged her to go back to sleep, become lucid within this recurring nightmare, but make a new response. Just don't run like a crazy person screaming, make a new response. And so that night, the client became lucidly aware in the nightmare. She ran over and saw that there was a train switch. She threw the switch, and now the train went a different direction. And when she came into his office the next day, Abramovich reported she seemed a changed person and felt profound relief. And that's normally what happens after these kind of lucid dreams. In our magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience, I interviewed a woman named Hope who had worked at Chicago O'Hare Airport as an airline mechanic, when suddenly in waking life, a Boeing 767 broke out of its moorings that she was working on, and it rolled over her legs as she watched. She was in the hospital for 6.5 months and had to have one of her legs amputated. But she said the worst thing was that every night she had nightmares. Someone was chasing her, something horrible was going to happen. She said it got so bad that she hated to fall asleep. That's how bad the recurring nightmares were. So she's out one day and she sees a book on lucid dreaming and remembers that, oh yeah, she used to have lucid dreams and would have fun flying around and doing things. But as she reads the book, she realizes that maybe you could use it for healing. So later that week, she's running from the monster and she thinks, wait a second, how can I be running? I only have one leg. And she becomes lucid at that moment. She turns and faces the monster, who suddenly has this befuddled look on its face, and she waves goodbye and flies away. And the result was that her nightmares just ceased after that. And she said it was so incredible to get her life back, to get her normal sleep routine back. and it was all because of a lucid dream. Now, the interesting thing is that some people have taken the ideas of lucid dreaming and used it to create psychological techniques. And so the number one technique for resolving PTSD nightmares is a waking technique called imagery rehearsal therapy. And so this psychiatrist, Barry Krakow at the University of New Mexico, he learned about lucid dreaming. I assume he'd probably had his own lucid dreams, so he knew what it was like. He modified a new way of working with it during the waking state, and he created this process called imagery rehearsal therapy. And it's been just incredibly successful, but it's based on the insights that people have had in lucid dreaming. And that's one of the values, I think, of lucid dreaming, that it's going to show us enough about the unconscious that we'll be able to work with the unconscious more knowledgeably, because we can see that, oh, in lucid dreaming this works. Oh, so why shouldn't this work in the waking state? Oh, it does work in the waking state, and proceed from there. But my question always is, could lucid dreaming help with other mental and emotional disorders? And there we have some examples of things. So, for example, one of the people who read my first book wrote me and asked, could lucid dreaming help with her fear of flying? And I said, well, possibly. If you want to give it a go, here's what I would suggest. And so I told her in her lucid dreams, go to the lucid dream airport. If you feel okay, get on the lucid dream airplane. And if you still feel okay, let the lucid dream airplane take off. I said, you know, it's a dream. And so at any moment you can stop it, but just start doing that and see what happens. And so she told me in the next month, she had 5 or 6 lucid dreams in which she went to the lucid dream airport, got on the lucid dream airplane, and let the airplane take off. And after the 6th lucid dream, she said, I don't have a fear of flying anymore. I'm going to buy a ticket. And so she bought a ticket to come to the International Association for the Study of Dreams conference. And she said, in fact, she bought a ticket that was a window seat because she wanted to see if it was like what she had experienced in her lucid dreams. And so she made it to the conference without any trouble. She made it back, and she's been flying ever since. So basically, people have used this kind of thing for fear of heights, fear of insects, fear of public speaking. They do it in their lucid dream until their fear goes away. And they know it's a dream, so they can end it at any time. But within 4 or 5 lucid dreams, the phobia is taken care of. So it's really interesting to see people use the virtual reality of lucid dreams to resolve these emotional phobias. Here's another one that I think might actually help people with obsessive compulsive disorder. And I borrowed this one from a book by Charlie Morley, a lucid dreamer in London. He met this guy, Antonio, who had come to one of his workshops. And so that night, Antonio became lucidly aware. And so he's going around having fun at this kind of party in his lucid dream, but he notices that there's this woman who keeps following him. And so eventually he turns around and asks her, so who are you? And the woman dream figure says, I'm your brain, but do us all a favor and stop smoking. It bothers us. And so Antonio was really stunned by this. And so he had to think of how to respond to this symbolic representation of his brain. And he realized that he'd tried to stop smoking, but he always had cravings. And so he looked at the woman and he says, okay, then how about this? Whenever I feel like a cigarette, you make me think of something else instead. And the woman responded, we'll see what we can do. And Antonio reports that when he woke up, he had no interest in smoking, that he could hang out with smokers and had no interest in smoking. It was like his smoking cravings just ceased. They just ended. And he just had no interest in smoking anymore. But this makes me think, and the reason I have this image of someone washing their hands who might have like obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorders, they're really hard to extinguish, to bring to an end. But I wonder if in a lucid dream, someone could meet a representation of their compulsion and then make a deal like this one, where whenever I think about washing my hands, you make me think of something else instead, and come to some resolution of some habit like that. But I think there's a lot of growth here in this area of using lucid dreams to resolve disorders. Now, here's one that really surprised me that came out after my first book. I got an email from a meth addict, and the guy wrote and he said, I am a recovered meth addict, and I'm writing you now that I've graduated from community college. He told me that your book basically has saved my life. And I said, well, I don't get that. He wrote and said, he told me his story. He grew up in a really dysfunctional family. It was just total mess. And so he got interested in drugs, and then he advanced, by the age of 16, he was already hooked on meth. He got arrested by the police, put in rehab. He was there for whatever, 30, 45 days, nothing happened. Within a few months, he was back hooked on meth. They caught him a second time, and they put him back in the clinic. And he was so bored, he saw on his drug counselor's table my first book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. And so he asked to read it because he was just bored out of his mind. And he knew he had had some lucid dreams before. So in there, he realizes how I talk about, you can ignore the dream figures and just engage your unconscious mind. You can just ask a question. Hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. And so that's what he does. Hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. And then his unconscious or larger awareness responds, would you like to see what your life will be like if you continue using drugs? And he said, sure. And he said for the next 10 minutes, it was like watching a video of all the people he would hurt, all the damage he'd do to his body, all the pain he'd cause his family, of all the trouble that were on and on and on. And he said at the conclusion of that lucid dream, that's when he decided to go cold turkey. And he told himself that when he graduated from community college, he would send me a note, because if he could graduate from community college, stay clean for 2 years, then he knew he'd really done something. But he also sent me some of his other lucid dreams of engaging the larger awareness. And I'll tell you, I was even impressed by the conversation back and forth they had. It was utterly fantastic. So again, I think lucid dreaming has a lot of capacity for emotional healing. Probably one of the most powerful ones for me, though, was this lucid dreamer in Bogota, Colombia. So I'd been invited down to Bogota, Colombia to give a workshop on lucid dreaming, a weekend workshop. And in the front row, there was this young woman. She's probably 40 years old. She's attractive and all, but you could see all this pain in her face. And it's almost like there's a dark cloud above her, too. But the strange thing was, she asked some of the best questions. And so I knew she was a good lucid dreamer. And even though I could see that she had all this pain in her face. So they have me come back to Bogota 6 months later, and this woman walks through the door and looks like 80% of the pain has disappeared from her face. She looks younger, taller, more attractive, the whole thing. And I go up to her immediately and I said, what happened to you? Because I remembered her from 6 months earlier. And she said, I have never thought about the idea of using lucid dreaming for healing until I went to your workshop. And so I did exactly what you said. I created a plan to heal myself, and I decided to engage it in my next lucid dream. And I said, okay, what did you do? She said she became lucid, she stabilized the lucid dream. And then you have to remember that Colombia is 95% Catholic. She called on the Virgin Mary, and she said, suddenly in front of her appears this woman in a blue cloak. And she she asked the Virgin Mary to please heal my heart. And she said, suddenly this woman put out her hands, and from her hands came this light that came into the lucid dreamer's heart. And she said it was the most ecstatic energy that was just pouring into her heart. And she said when she woke up, she was just a changed person. And she said, you want to know the funny thing, Robert? And I said, what's that? She said, I can remember the events in my life, but now they have no pain. It's like the memory wasn't gone. It was just all the pain was gone. It was she couldn't even generate pain thinking of remembering it again. It was like the pain had just been rectified. Anyway, it was one of the most dramatic emotional healings that I'd ever seen. But that brings us to the next question of what about physical healing? Could you use lucid dreaming to affect or heal the physical body? And I think there's just lots of wonderful evidence here. But first, I want to get to some of the science that I think is behind all of it. So remember, the eye signal verification technique, you move your lucid dream eyes left to right to signal that you're consciously aware. But what happens? Your physical eyes move. And so that shows that the lucid action is making a physical result. So then Stephen LaBerge there at Stanford did another research test. He brought lucid dreamers into the sleep lab and he said, okay, when you become lucidly aware, signal with your eyes you're lucidly aware, and then clench your fist in an alternating pattern within the lucid dream. And we have these sensors around your arm, and we'll see if there's any muscle movement. And what happened? They signaled with their eyes, they were lucid, and then the sensors started to show that there was this subliminal muscle movement in an alternating left-right pattern in their forearms. So again, the lucid action affected the physical body. That's the important point. Then he brought people in and he said, okay, when you become lucidly aware, signal that you're lucidly aware, and then I want you to start singing. Just start singing and singing and singing in your lucid dream. And so they were measuring the brain hemisphere activity because your right brain, your right hemisphere will become more active when you're singing. And then some other lucid dreamers, he had them become lucid and do math problems and counting when they became lucidly aware. And what happened? Their left brain hemisphere became more active. So again, what you're seeing is the lucid action is leading to a physical result. He had another time when he asked people to change their breathing when they became lucidly aware. And of course, again, their physical breathing changed in tandem when they became lucidly aware, just like he had asked them to do. So again, what we're seeing here is the physical body is being affected by the lucid dream activity. And so he kind of summarized it by saying dream events are closely paralleled by brain events. And other places, he said much the same thing, that dream events and the mind are just very closely connected. But now I want to get into some actual lucid dream healing events. So here we have a gentleman, Matthew Zinker. He wrote this story and sent it into our magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience. So he had eye pigment dispersion syndrome, where the retina, the pigment of his eye, was flaking away. And what happens when these flakes start to clog up the eye duct, then pressure will build in the eye and you can go blind by virtue of this eye pigment dispersion syndrome. So there's no cure for it. So what he's showing here is that he got his baseline in April 2014. Then he came back in January 2020. And when you start looking at the numbers, you can see that they're starting to reduce, and the doctor is really worried. He says, oh, your eye pigment isn't as thick as is becoming less thinner and thinner and thinner. And so after January 2020, he decides to try to have a lucid dream and heal his eyes. He has 2 lucid dreams. And then suddenly in May of 2020, when he comes back for his next checkup, suddenly there's a vast improvement. Like look up here in April, this was 86. Now it goes down to 70, but here it shoots back up to 92. And the doctor was blown away. He says, "You've had a spontaneous remission because there's no drugs that help eye pigment dispersion syndrome. There's nothing like that." And the guy wonders if these two lucid dreams of trying to heal were the causative factor. But it makes you see how you could get people who have a non-threatening ailment, physical ailment, and make them part of a lucid dream study where they tried to heal themselves. Here was another guy who read my first book, Ray Brannon. He wrote this up for the magazine. He had GERD, or gastroesophageal reflux disorder, and it was so bad that he slept sitting up, that he just put up a bunch of pillows and just kind of sat up in the corner of the bedroom. And he had tried everything to get this healed and been to all sorts of doctors, and nothing was helping. So he read my book, and I have this entire chapter on healing examples and principles as I saw it. In 2 different lucid dreams, he intended for his GERD to be healed. In the second one, it was kind of funny. He became lucidly aware. He went and talked to all these dream figures and asked them to assist him with healing, and they all agreed to assist him. And again, from the hands of the dream figures came all this light that came into his torso. And the result was, when he woke up from that second lucid dream of healing, he said he felt completely different. He began sleeping in bed like a normal person, and the issue was resolved. He said the GERD went away. I talked to him about a year ago, and so the GERD hadn't reappeared in any sense, over the course of 7 years. He did find out, though, that there was a medical issue that the doctors had failed to diagnostically figure out that was what had brought this all about. But in the lucid dream, he healed it. He healed the symptoms, so he was happy with that. Here's another wonderful example. Beverly Kedzierski de Urso. She was one of the primary research subjects of Stephen LaBerge. A number of years ago, she went to the doctor and found out that she had an expanded uterus and a large cyst and a mass that looked like a tumor. And so the doctor said, "I want you to come back in a week, and we're going to do some more examining here and try to figure this out." So she's such a good lucid dreamer. She decided that she'd try to figure this out in a lucid dream. So here's what's funny. She becomes lucid, and first she begins to ask random dream figures, what do they think about her expanded uterus and large cyst mass? And she gets these kind of random answers, which is what I would expect. If you ask random dream figures, you'll get random responses. Then she decided to ask what she calls the source, or the unconscious mind. She just asked, "Hey, what does this mean?" And she said, all of a sudden, skeletons begin to appear, ambulances, fire trucks, planes crash. She said there were all these death symbols, and so that really had her worried. And then the next, she wakes up, she falls back asleep. Now she's semi-lucidly aware. She sees geometric figures of colored light in the sky. They begin to send her healing energy. Her little son is worried, and she says, "Oh no, don't worry, they've come to heal me." And she feels all this colored light energy coming on her body. When she wakes up, she goes to the doctor appointment, and the doctor discovers that now her uterus is no longer expanded, and she no longer has a large cyst or a mass. And she made him write it down and give it to her, just so she could show that something happened in between those 2 exams. There's a wonderful story. My friend Ed Kellogg told me about a woman with plantar warts. These plantar warts were so painful that it was really hard for the woman to walk. She'd been using that Shakti Gawain creative visualization technique of trying to visualize them to go away, but a month later, still nothing had happened. So my friend Ed Kellogg suggested that she try in a lucid dream to heal her plantar warts. She becomes lucid. She remembers her goal to heal her plantar warts. For her, she created a ball of healing light between her hands in the lucid dream, placed it over each of her feet, intending for them to be healed. And when she woke up, she looked at the warts. They'd turned black overnight, and within 10 days, they all fell off. And so that's another wonderful example. And so here's Ed Kellogg. He's probably the person who first began to write about physical healing in a lucid dream. because he had one time, he was eating a shish kebab and he punctured a tonsil, which then became infected. And so he said he had these red streaks running up and down the side of his face and throat. He said it was incredibly painful. He didn't want to go to a doctor. He just wanted to get healed. And he happens to have a lucid dream. He affirms for a healing to take place. And he said when he woke up, I think something like 90% of the pain was gone. And within 3 hours, the stripes disappeared and all of that. And so he was one of the first people to get this area going. But Ed also went on to kind of talk about this more. He realized that not only was there curative lucid dreams, like what I've talked about here, but there's also diagnostic lucid dreams in which the person was told what their situation was. Because sometimes the doctors don't get it right, or sometimes the person isn't even aware that, you know, they have the ailment. And in a lucid dream, they were told they were diagnosed. Then there's also prescriptive lucid dreams. Sometimes in a lucid dreams, people are told what they should eat. Sometimes they're told even what hospital they should go to, what doctor they should go to. It's incredible, some of the prescriptive lucid dream. But he said there were really these 3 different types of lucid dreams that help people with healing. So if you're one of these people who would ever have an interest in something like this, what I always encourage you to do is develop a plan of action while you're awake. You have to figure out how you're going to approach it in the lucid dream. And then when you become lucidly aware, you have to take the bull by the horns and act in towards healing. Also, it helps to just have a positive belief, a positive expectation that the healing is taking place. So you might create a ball of healing light. You might energize your hand, make it full of healing energy and stick it into you. You might do like Ed did. Sometimes he'd create a rhyme. Now from my hands with power divine, the healing light on my knee will shine. Something like that, which focuses energy and would make things happen. In my first book, I include results of people who had no success. And it's kind of interesting to see how they sabotage it. For example, this one woman became lucidly aware in a hospital. And so what does she do? She goes to find the dream doctor. And she tells the dream doctor what her problem is and asks for a healing. And he says, oh, it's Friday, you come at 5 o'clock, and I can't be bothered. And she says, you've got to help me, you're a doctor. And he says, okay, well, why don't you start eating a certain food? And she goes, oh, I can't eat that, it gives me gas. And so here the doctor and the lucid dream gives her an idea, but she poo-poos it. Then she runs up to a nurse, she gets the nurse to give her a suggestion, and then she disagrees with the nurse. And so there's no change in this woman's experience, because she basically had an external locus of control. The power was in the doctor and the nurse. She didn't have the power to heal herself within the lucid dream. She refused the suggestions. They even gave her good ideas, which probably would have helped, but she just refused them. And so sometimes you see in these experiences that people lack kind of a positive expectation that they can do something within a lucid dream to help heal themselves. But finally, and I'm wrapping up now, it's this idea of grief and grief counseling. You know, there's a lot of people who have lost loved ones, and sometimes when it goes on for many months and years, you know, sometimes I wonder, what if they learned lucid dreaming and could engage their loved one within a lucid dream? Because a lot of times lucid dreamers become consciously aware when they see someone who's passed on. They'll go, wait a second, grandma passed away 10 years ago. Oh, I must be dreaming. And then you can have a conversation with grandma. You might learn something that you didn't know. So it was funny. I was doing a 30-day online workshop with IONS. There was a woman who had visited a psychic earlier that month. And the psychic asked her, are you planning to learn how to lucid dream? And the woman said, oh, yes, I'm going to take a course by Robert Waggoner. And the psychic goes, oh, well, good. Your brother-in-law is telling me that he's hoping you'll become lucid so he can talk to you. And the funny thing was, when she explained this story, I knew she wasn't going to have a lucid dream because she didn't want to talk to her brother-in-law. And darned if she didn't. she did not have a lucid dream the whole 30 days. Maybe afterwards you did, but anyway, so you still have those kind of issues. But we'll open it up for questions now. I did want to mention that here on February 23rd, I'm going to have an online 30-day course with ions at noetics.org if you want to check that out. So I'll stop sharing here and we can open it up for questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Really wonderful information. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. You can put them in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand if you want to ask Robert directly. I have a question that's come in from YouTube. And this is the wording. Can you merge both of the sides of the brain while awake to heal as well?
Right. So I'm glad you asked that. So I want to tell you a story of how I healed my hay fever. And I did it by using mindful conscious awareness techniques that I learned by virtue of lucid dreaming. So this is what I did. Every August and September where I live, I'd have horrible hay fever. My sinuses would become all swelled up. I could barely sleep at night. My throat was all messed up. It was just a disaster every August and September. But then I realized, well, wait a second. I'm telling people that you can heal by virtue of the mind. So I decided to come up with my own approach, and this is what I did. I would identify and mindfully observe every time I thought about hay fever or that August and September were going to be a disaster. So first, I became aware of my mental chatter around health. Then I told myself, no, not this year. And then the most important thing, I told myself what I wanted to experience. This year, I'll breathe easily and naturally. That's what my goal was. This year, I'll breathe easily and naturally. Because a lot of times what people do, they become mindfully aware of it and they say no, but they don't tell their subconscious what they want to experience. And so there's no forward progress. I told my subconscious, this year, I'll breathe easily and naturally. The first year of doing this, my symptoms decreased 70%. The second year, they decreased 90%. The next year, they decreased 95%. Now I don't even think about hay fever. Wow. And I'll tell you, it's just becoming mindfully aware of that chatter. It's like the famous hypnotherapist Milton Erickson said, the unconscious is always listening. And when you start to pay attention to your mind, oh God, August is coming, I'm going to have hay fever, it'll be horrible, I won't be able to breathe, my throat will swell, and all, you're basically creating the conditions for disaster. And so you have to unwind it, observe it, say no, not this year, and then you have to tell it where you want it to go. And so that's how I think you kind of merge the conscious with the subconscious parts of the brain, and you can use this to overcome physical ailments.
That's so good. I know in your book you mentioned a lot, the importance of positive expectation, right? That if you don't go in, and you mentioned it with that example with the nurse, if you just think, well, I'm going to do this, but it's not really going to work, you're kind of shutting it down from the very beginning. So to bring that into your waking life, of course, is really important as well. Alan has been diagnosed with lymphoma cancer. He starts chemo at the end of the month. We want suggestions for using lucid dreaming to heal cancer.
Right. So again, there's a few ways of thinking about this. If you're a lucid dreamer and know how to lucid dream, then the ideas that I presented in this talk would be helpful. But a lot of times people suddenly have a health issue and they don't have any real connection with lucid dreaming. And so it's a little bit difficult to get started right as you're facing all this issues. But I think what might be really important is first to recognize your mental chatter and find out what it is that you want. Where do you want to end up? And that I'll have an easy time with chemotherapy, that I'll be cancer-free, within 3 months or whatever it is. Figure out what it is that you want so you can begin to tell your subconscious, unconscious mind exactly what it is that you want. And every time you think that, oh, I'm going through this cancer and blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, it's okay because here in 3 months, I'm going to be free of cancer and I'll have, whatever, my life back or whatever it is. You have to figure it out for yourself. Don't use my example, but figure it out for yourself what it is you want. Then you can also do dream incubation. So dream incubation is what I call lucid light, like L-I-T-E. It's kind of like yogurt light is yogurt without all the calories and stuff. Dream incubation is kind of lucid light. Tonight in my dreams, I will marshal all my healing energies and I will use them for the most creative, healthy result, whatever it is. You just have to come up with your own very simple, straightforward dream incubation. Tonight in my dreams, whatever it is, I'll use all of my dreams in such a way that it helps to heal me on all levels. And just begin to tell yourself that that's what your goal is that night for your dreaming. And you might find that you have dreams in which healing aspects begin to take place or something like that. So that's how I think I would approach it. But of course, if you're good at lucid dreaming, please rewatch this video and try some of these ideas or get my book and read this.
Yeah, someone was asking here, Gail wanted to know, if you hardly ever remember your dream, can you still lucid dream? And I would recommend, because I was telling Robert before we started that I read his book years ago. I just reread it again last week. And since I haven't had any lucid dreams, but I've been having wild, just really vivid dreams. And and I think the intention, right, or just kind of the having it in your awareness trigger something, right? Is that
right? You know what I think of that kind of focus and that intent to re-engage with your dreams is enough for them to come back and to be elevated in your mind and you begin to remember them again. But you really got to focus on it. You can't spend 5 seconds, oh, I want to remember my dream, and then sit there and watch the TV. You really have to mentally get engaged with it somehow.
Yeah, I agree. June said that she used dreams to heal her unhappy relationship with her father. Well, I think it's with her father after his father's death. Have you heard of that? Have like sort of healing when somebody's out of the body, right? In that dream state.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful examples, and in my first book, I have a chapter on interacting with the deceased in deceased dream figures. Now, one thing I do want to, in lucid dreams, one thing that I do want to say, just because you meet a deceased dream figure, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a visitation dream. For example, they might just be a symbolic projection of your grief or your anger or whatever issue it is. So here's an example. After my father passed away, I decided that I'll wait for him to come visit me when he wants to visit me. And so it was about 3 years later, I see this man coming down a ladder, and it's my father. And I become lucidly aware because I remember, oh yeah, Dad died 3 years ago. But I began to laugh because he had such a bad haircut. And I thought, he can't even get a good haircut in the after-death state. This is just not right. And then I thought, well, wait a second, is this my dad as a spiritual being coming to visit me, or is this just a dream symbol, a projection of my mind? And so when he came down, we greeted each other. And so I began to ask him questions. I said, hey, Dad, when do you think Mom's going to pass away? And he said, probably in 3 to 6 years. I said, of what? And he said, a heart condition. And then I asked him one more question, and he responded. And then he told me to please be quiet because he came to tell me things. And then he began to explain things about the family and all. But it was literally 3 years later, almost to that month, that my mom went to the hospital and almost died of a heart condition. And then a couple of years after that, she'd been taking a prescribed medication that they later realized was hurting people's heart. And she almost passed away again, but she made it through that period. So the point I'm trying to get to here is you have to interact with the deceased dream figure and kind of ask it questions in order to learn or discover whether it has knowledge outside of your knowing and whether it has information. And normally you'll immediately recognize it because normally they want to explain something or share something or tell something, and that's how you'll figure it out. But yes, you can use it to heal unhappy relationships. I got just one other just quick story I wanted to tell. About 2 years ago, I had a dream. I was driving in my hometown. I'm driving along and I see the family business, and written on the family business is partially funded by a loan from grandfather Frank, blah, blah, blah. And I'm driving and I think, what? And I become semi-lucid at this moment, thinking no one ever said that grandfather had partially funded the start of the family business. So what had happened, my mom and her parents had gotten divorced during the Great Depression. And then that cast my poor mom and as a little girl into poverty with her mom. And so she never really, she had a hard time forgiving her father for all of this. So I barely knew my grandfather. I'd go up to the farm on occasion, but I just barely knew the guy. And so what was funny, so I woke up from this dream and I called up my mom and I said, Mom, did grandfather Frank provide a loan to the family business to help it get started? And she said, who told you that? And I said, I saw it in a dream. And she said, yes, he gave us a loan to get it started because we ran out of money so quickly because we were so undercapitalized. But I want you to know we paid him back every last penny. But what I'm trying to get across here is my grandfather wanted someone in the family to redeem him, to see that he wasn't a monster, that he might have had his mistakes like anybody, but that he had helped the family when we really needed help and all. And it was really a powerful moment for me to really understand how deep these emotional connections carry on, because he had passed away 30 years earlier.
Yeah.
And he's still, in touch with me on occasion to provide those kind of things.
Yeah, you can do ancestral healing, it sounds like, through lucid dreaming, which is just amazing.
I think you can.
Daniel wants to know, have any instruments or devices been found to be helpful with training for lucid dreaming?
Yeah, that's a good one. Stephen LaBerge came up with this Nova Dreamer that would flash red lights in your eyes when it became aware that you were having rapid eye movement. And if you saw red lights in the dream, then you were supposed to realize, oh, red lights, oh, this is a dream, I'm dreaming this, and become lucidly aware. So there's things out there. It's kind of a caveat emptor, though, situation. You have to be careful because some people are just trying to sell stuff. Other people are really trying to make great products. So there are some things like that might help a person become lucidly aware.
Okay, Alan wants to know, are any lucid dreams actually out-of-body experiences? And what's the overlap?
Right. So I say that lucid dreams and out-of-bodies are kind of like a house cat compared to a mountain lion. They're in the same family of felines, but they're not the same creature. And so think of this: you're driving your car, you get into a horrible accident, your body is laying lifeless on the pavement. Here is the ambulance to help revive you, and you're watching this all from 20 feet above you. So that would be what we would call an out-of-body experience. And nowhere in that is it a dream you become aware of dreaming while in the dream state. So you can see right there, they're a little bit different. Robert Monroe said that they were distinctly different. And Robert Monroe is kind of the grandfather of out-of-body studies and founded the Monroe Institute. He said the number one difference was in an out-of-body situation, the environment is stable. But in a lucid dreaming situation, the environment is not stable. Like you look at a clock and it says it's 12:32. You look the other way, then you look back, oh, and now it's 5:56. And he says it's just unstable. It's kind of a reflective mental realm, whereas he would say that in the out-of-body state that you're actually in dimensions that exist with greater stability. There's a lot of other things too, but again, a lucid dream, you realize within a dream you're dreaming, and you might see something odd and go, oh, well, that's too weird. Oh, this is a dream. But out of body, you might be falling asleep, start to hear this humming and buzzing, find that you're seeing the bedroom from 6 feet above your bed. How did I get up here? And there's no realizing within a dream you're dreaming in that situation. They are similar. There's some similarities, just like a cat and a mountain lion, but they're distinctly phenomenologically different.
Thank you for that. That's a really good distinction. Sue wants to know, are there any limitations on what you can cause to happen in a lucid dream?
So there are limitations, but most of the limitations are the ones that you carry with you. So for example, sometimes in a lucid dream, you can't fly very well, or you can only go 6 feet high. It's all based upon your beliefs and expectations. If you stop in that moment and realize, wait a second, gravity doesn't exist in a lucid dream, then you'll be able to fly like Superman. You can go any which way because gravity doesn't exist. But what people don't realize, and what I try to explain in my books, we bring our beliefs and expectations and our focus and intent with us. And sometimes our beliefs are very limiting. They're extremely limiting. So I would say there's virtually, lucid dreaming is such a wide open platform that the only limitation is the ones within you. Either technical knowledge or limiting beliefs or fear. Sometimes people are so blown away by what happens that they want out as soon as possible. In fact, in some lucid dreams, when I ask my larger awareness to have a really powerful experience, sometimes I'll say, and I want it to occur only for 1 minute, because I know it'll be so intense. And what happens, the experience starts to happen, it's incredibly energetically intense. And then 1 minute later, boom, it's like someone just turns it off. I'm back in a regular lucid dream. It's because that emotional level of what we can take is the other limiting factor. So our beliefs and kind of how much energy, how much emotional level we can take.
So James wanted to know, does realizing you're in a lucid dream ever cause you to wake up, ever cause people to wake up, and how do you prevent that?
Right. So for beginners, that's the number one issue, is normally they become lucid and they get so excited that they immediately wake up. And so it's like a circuit breaker that if you get too much emotional energy, boom, you'll blow the circuit breaker and you'll wake up. And so that's why in my courses, I always teach people that when you become lucidly aware, you have to remain relatively calm. And so you can tell yourself, calm down. You can look at something boring like your hands or the floor. But as long as you tell yourself to calm down, normally your mind, your body will respond to any vocalized intent, stay calm, calm down. And as long as you can stay calm, then you can stay lucid, at least for a bit. There's other things that you have to do in order to really stabilize the lucid dream, to have a long lucid dream. So that's actually a difficult question. But first, it's reduce your emotions. Second, you want to enhance your awareness. And third, you want to maintain your focus. You want to keep reminding yourself that, oh, this is a dream, I'm dreaming this, because it'll all seem so real that you'll just return to regular dreaming. You'll think that, oh, this is real. and you'll just return to regular dreaming. And so you've got to keep that mindful awareness that, oh, that's a dream house, that's a dream car, that's a dream snake, you have to keep that awareness, otherwise you'll return to regular dreaming.
Thank you. Okay, Kayla wants to know, when you're trying to get healing, are you looking for any dream figure or looking for a particular healer? She has lucid dreams, but she's never asked questions of a dream healer, of a dream figure.
Right. So I would really encourage you to read my books and read these chapters on healing and lucid dreams, because there's a lot of detailed information there. But again, I gave the example of the woman of what not to do. Don't go find a dream doctor. Don't go find a dream nurse. For God's sake, you're consciously aware within the dream. Create a ball of healing light between your hands and put it on your bad shoulder or your bad knee. Put healing energy into your hand. Put it into your heart. Heal your heart. There's a whole set of techniques, but you should act in that moment and realize that you have the power to act in that moment. Waiting on others to heal isn't really the best gambit. Instead, you should heal yourself. Now, sometimes it's interesting, like one woman had out of control menstrual bleeding, and the doctor told her she's going to get a hysterectomy. She became lucid. She had a plan to energize her hand, and she was going to place her energized hand into her dream uterus and heal it. But then she heard this little voice inside her head say, first heal your heart. And she realized, oh, there's something. And so the heart is not only a physical thing, it's also symbolic of emotional relationships and all that kind of thing. So first she did that, then she did her original plan, put her energized hand into her dream uterus. When she woke up, the bleeding had stopped. The doctor said, oh, if there's no bleeding, then we don't have to have a hysterectomy. And she's continued on for 20 or 30 years like that, doing just fine. So
Okay.
Again, you want to...
I have a couple more. How many levels, how many different types of lucid dreaming are there? Are there levels of lucid dreaming?
Well, so most people are kind of just at the play level. They become lucid, they play around, they've heard about lucid dream sex, they go have lucid dream sex, they just have fun. And so they're at the very simplistic, most hedonistic kind of level of lucid dreaming. I think when you begin to engage your larger awareness, now you're at a new level. Like, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. And the entire lucid dream changes. Now you've touched something deeper than Robert you or Chris you or whomever you're on to a new level. Then there's, in my book, I talk about going beyond lucid dreaming. And it's too complicated to get into right now, but I began to have just totally unique experiences then. So yeah, I would say there's levels, but again, you're working through your own belief system, your own emotional system. If you become too afraid, if it's too intense or too whatever, you'll shut it down. There you go. Or if you believe, oh, it's only about playing around, having fun, that's where you'll stop. But if you begin to read books like mine and realize how deep you can take it, then you'll have your mind open and you can really see how deep lucid dreaming goes.
Yeah, because it's quite a journey, I think. Damon wants to know, he's curious if you have any information or experience on the use of the drug galantamine in assisting lucid dreaming.
Right. So galantamine is the active ingredient in Alzheimer's drugs because it helps those people kind of be here now. And so some people have used galantamine as a supplement to help them lucid dream. Now, I want to tell you that galantamine is a very powerful herb. And if you take it after you've already been asleep for 4 hours. Don't take it at 11 o'clock at night when you're falling asleep. You'll have the worst night of sleep humanly imaginable. It'll be a disaster. You take it after you've already been asleep for 4 hours. And then again, you have to be careful. If you're a very petite person, I would take half of the recommended dose. It's a powerful thing, but oftentimes it helps some people become lucidly aware. My friend Ed Kellogg, who I mentioned, he did a study where he got placebos and then real galantamine. And he did his own personal study, and he actually found that he had more lucid dreams taking the placebos than he did the galantamine. So anything you take, there's always the kind of placebo effect, but yes, galantamine does exist. I've taken it. I don't like taking it. I did it maybe 5 times because it would kind of energetically kind of wash me out. I mean, it was like drinking 2 6-packs or something. That's how I would feel in the morning. I didn't feel enthused and great in the morning. I felt like, oh, I'm wrung out. But everyone will have their own unique experience. So if you want to go for it, give it a go.
Okay, then that goes into Oliver's questions. Are there any dangers of lucid dreaming that we should be mindful of?
So when I go talking at universities and all, I'll tell the students that if you cannot handle waking life, don't get involved in lucid dreaming. So
that's right.
Have a good relationship with waking life before you decide to get into into lucid dreaming. And the reason I say that, if you're really super depressed or something, then you might become lucid. And what are you going to meet? You're going to meet the energy of your depression. And here's a big mean monster or God knows what, and you'll probably freak out or whatever. So get your head in a good space before you get into lucid dreaming. Probably the only other danger would be, you can get really deep into lucid dreaming, and it'll make you start to question everything. And so that's why it's part of this Buddhist dream yoga is a 3-year practice. And I'll tell you, for me, I got into a space where I began to question everything. So what I tell people is, if the world just begins to seem way too dreamy, get out into nature. Take walks, get out in the sun, get outside. Just don't sit in your apartment listening to music all day. Get out, engage real people, go around, get out into nature, because nature will kind of get you back to the right spot. But I would say those would be the 2 main issues.
Yeah, that sounds so. Both Alan and Kevin want to know. So Alan says, it seems like lucid dreaming is doing your own virtual reality programming. And Kevin says, do you believe that it's possible that reality is just a particularly lucid form of dreaming, this waking reality?
Well,
we're getting really philosophical here.
But what I say to people, in a virtual reality game, there's an end, you can get to the very end. But who codes the lucid dream? Who programs the lucid dreaming experience? And I'll tell you, when you begin to interact with this larger awareness and see its level of creativity, you begin to realize that there's something truly significant, much more going on here. And that's when you really begin to have your mind blown and realize that this larger awareness, this inner self, actually exists, and you can directly engage it, of course, if you know how to go about it and all.
Okay, so I'm going to do 2 more questions. So thank you for everyone who has submitted questions. So there's an A and B of this. One is just there's a woman on YouTube who said that she did lucid dreaming for a long time, has not done it for a long time, wants to know what's the best way to get back in, maybe just starting from the beginning. And James wants to know, what's the best way that are learning to recognize that you're dreaming? Is it the story? Is it looking at your hands, like Carlos Castaneda said, or what do you use?
So everyone has to accept and begin where they are. If I was a rank beginner, I would use this practice of looking at your hands. It's like Pavlov and a conditioned response. He'd ring a bell and the dogs would salivate. See your hands. The first thought has to be, am I dreaming? And you're walking along, boom, your hands appear. Oh, this is a dream. You're climbing a ladder, see your hands. My hands, is this a dream? Oh yeah, this is a dream. What am I doing on this giant ladder? So for a beginner, I think it's a great approach. The power of suggestion is a great approach. Tonight, in my dreams, I'll be more critically aware. And when I notice something strange, I'll realize I'm dreaming. Tonight, in my dreams, I'll be more critically aware. And when I notice something strange, I'll realize I'm dreaming. Those are simple, easy techniques. When I go on the web now, there's some techniques that people are proposing that are so outlandish or take so long to accomplish. They're just outrageous. So that's what I would do. To the earlier question about how to begin again, I'll tell you, sometimes people stop their lucid dreaming because they've had a big lucid dream that kind of freaks them out. And so they're so blown away by the lucid dream that they just put lucid dreaming on the shelf. And so sometimes you have to resolve any fear or concern about your last lucid dream before you start up again. But if you wanted to begin again, what I would say is you have to figure out, what's my goal? What do I want to achieve? Because if you have a goal that's really going to drive you forward or give you energy, then it'll be easy. But if it's just this kind of work of writing down your dreams and telling yourself, oh, I'm going to become aware of dreaming tonight, then it'll just seem like another work thing, and within a few weeks you'll give up. So find out what really you want to accomplish.
Okay. You mentioned that people have used it for learning new skills, right?
Right.
So the answer to that question is yes. And this will be our last one. How do you erase bad subconscious programs?
Right. So I had a bad subconscious program. I feared August and September. Why? Because I was going to have hay fever. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's pollen in the air and all that kind of crap. That was a bad subconscious program. So first, I became mindfully aware of when it was going through my head. Then I said, no, not this year. And then the most important thing, what I wanted instead of that program, what program did I want? So it's like going to the Uber driver. Where do you want to go? I just want to get out of here. Where do you want to go? I want to get away from here. Where do you want to go? I want to get away from here. That person goes nowhere. They just want to get away from here. You've got to tell your unconscious mind where you want to go. So if you have negative programming, first become aware of it, deny the negative programming, and then tell your mind what the new programming is, and just do it every day. Every time it pops up into your head, do it, that process. Aware of it, no, not this year. This year, we're doing this instead. And within 3 or 4 weeks, I think you'll find that the new programming is taking over and the old programming is dying.
Fantastic. Can you put up that slide again about your upcoming class? So this is a 30-day, or do you still have it?
Yeah, I don't know if I have it up there to put on, but it's at IONS, which is the Institute of Noetic Sciences. It's noetics.org. And if you just go on their recent or upcoming events, I think it starts February 23rd. And it's a lot of fun because people get into it for 30 days. There's a lot of people there as well who support each other on the journey. And so it's really fun to see what happens.
Yeah.
Noetic.org.
Noetic.org. And I'll put it out in the next newsletter as well, just so if you want to register for that, which sounds really fun and interesting. I love the idea of doing it with a group of people and kind of comparing notes.
Yeah.
So we're up against time. So I just want to thank everyone for their questions, really great questions. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Robert, for this. This is really just wonderful and enlightening and exciting. I can't wait to start this adventure.
Judy, thanks so much. And everyone, I really enjoyed chatting with you. If you go to my website and have another question or a personal question, you can send it there and I'll do my best to respond in the next day or two. But I really appreciate the opportunity and thanks so much for having me on.
Okay.